morning. Today we are covering Truth 9, Truth of Wisdom and Mentorship. So there are actually 3 laws that dictate this particular truth. The main one that I'm going to be talking about today is principle of cause and effect, also known as karma. However, when we get to the symbolism slide, I will briefly talk about the principle of gender and principle of mentalism, as all of these laws are codependent. So the law of cause and effect states, every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. So in the principle of mentalism, we understand that all planes of the universe are sort of guided by this law of mentalism, and everything is included in that. Law of gender, I've stated before, is sort of like the one that we can understand as humans in the 6th chakra, since we see gender in everything. And we're going to explain karma or cause and effect a little bit more today. The Kabbalion states every thought we think, every act we perform has its direct and indirect results, which fit into the great chain of cause and effect. So there is nothing that you think that doesn't, law of correspondence, affect your earthly world, either within your personal body or within the world that you're living. So there's no such thing as luck. There's no such thing as chance. All this is that we do not have access to those higher laws in the universe. So we say good luck or it was chance encounter, but all laws are acting on all of the planes. So let's talk a little bit about karma and how it's created. There are actually 3 types of karma. The first is sanchita karma. So I want you to imagine like a big garbage bag of all of the lifetimes of karma that you've ever accumulated. When you enter and you choose your parents based on that karmic vibration, you are only pulling out prabha karma. That is one little thread of the karma in this entire lifetime. That's why I take you back to Clotho or the Fates, or that you only have one theme and one thread in your story. Because from that big garbage bag of sanchita karma, which is all of the karma overall the lifetimes, you in each incarnation only work on one. So your creation myth, your origin story, your one problem, your one thought, your one emotion, your one desire refers back to this prabha karma, and it's located in every single thing that you think, that you say, every story you share. Now, during your lifetime, and this is really what's important, you will create additional karma, and that is called agami karma. That is really what we're trying to avoid. When you incarnate, you choose your parents based on a vibration of the prabha karma that you're going to work through this lifetime. That was truth 4. But now in truth 9, we're getting to a point of unified consciousness where we stop creating additional karma, which is agami karma. But we've got to understand the previous 8 truths in order to understand that we even have control of this. So Alice Bailey in Labors of Hercules, I love what she says. Don't be good, don't be harmless, don't serve merely in order to get away from it all, which is what a lot of people do. I call this transcendental narcissism, when we're only trying to work from the divine centers, the higher chakras. You are creating karma, whether you're seeking pain as pleasure or pleasure as pain. Just because you do not say something and you think it doesn't mean it doesn't create karma. So this idea of being good, of being nice is a nonsense. It isn't true. You still create karma every time. It's only when you say, think, and do that we learned in Truth 5 that we stop creating additional agami karma. So the myth I want to share with you is Hercules' labor with the Stymphalian birds. So Hercules, top of a mountain, is told that he has to kill these Stymphalian birds that are covered in like this metal coating, and they're making this noise that is like just major dissonance. and is really disrupting the countryside. And the teacher says, the flame that gleams beyond the mine reveals direction sure. The tasks awaits. Through gate the 9th, you now must go. So what happens is, he's at the top of the mountain and these birds are just making this noise, and he takes his bow and arrow and he's starting to hit. But every time that arrow hits the armor, it flies away. It doesn't impact the birds. So Athena shows up. Athena is the flame beyond the mind. Athena is the goddess of wisdom. So now we're thinking strategy. We're thinking wisdom. This is true 9 of wisdom. This is no longer rational thought. And in a moment, we'll talk about duality and rational thought versus unified consciousness. In astrology, this would be linked to Sagittarius. It's the one arrow, the one pointed arrow. We are now unified in our consciousness. We're no longer thinking that what we think or what we're doing in behavior change is enough. We understand that it's about transmutation. It's about belief change. We have to have unified consciousness where spirit and matter are constantly working together. This is a shaman that walks between the worlds. This is a mystic that walks in both of the consciousness. So he's hitting the birds and the arrows are just flying away, and Athena shows up and brings him symbols. The Greek word of symbol actually means cup or chalice. So now we're talking about, and we'll get to that in Truth 12, but the chalice or the symbol of the chalice is something that we're going to see linked to Mother Earth, linked to Venus, linked to Aphrodite, linked to the 4th chakra. We cannot unify the mind. We cannot be in unified consciousness unless we're embodied in the body, hence the chalice. So what Athena does is bring these symbols, and Hercules starts to make really, really loud noises that are louder than the dissonance that the birds are making with their armor. There's symbolism here. The noise is the noise of the thoughts. The noise is the thought of that, the thoughts that keep going and going, going. We need something beyond the mind. The thoughts never stop. Truth 1, truth of thoughts, never, ever do they stop. In Truth 4, we learn about intuition, but the intuition is only as good as the quality of the thoughts. So now we've reached this point where we have to quiet the mind so we can hear what's beyond. And this is only through unified consciousness, where the rational and the spiritual mind are in cahoots. They're saying the same thing, and we're behaving accordingly. So the lesson here is restraint of speech through control of thought. In Truth 10, in Silence and Simplicity, we're going to work a lot with sound, but this is the precursor to that truth. This is when we realize that there are things we may say, may not say, deciphering and discerning the beginnings of what it is that we will and will not say. So obviously gossip here is under control. We're controlling the thoughts in the sense that the noise, the dissonance, we've had our TED Talk, we have these strategies to keep those thoughts under wraps, even though they'll never go away, to allow something of a higher vibration, like the symbols, like the wisdom from the laws, from the universal consciousness, to inform what will then become Silence and Simplicity in Truth 10. You have to learn what not to say about the life of the soul. Very copious talking about things for which people may not as yet be ready. I'm working on this in my own practice with myself and with clients, where there are certain things that people aren't ready yet. And now you become a true mentor, where you're vibrating the teachings and you don't necessarily always have to speak everything, but yet you still embody the lived wisdom and the lived teachings. So he slams on these symbols, and now the birds rise above. Remember, anything that rises above means that it's transmuted, that it's raising in consciousness, and then he is able to take his bow and arrow and hit the fleshy part of the bird, and then they die in the marsh. So I want to talk a little bit about symbolism. In astrology, we have Gemini. We saw this with the 2 types of teachers, Busiris and Nereus, in the Truth of Emotion and Breath. And this is rational thought. This is when we start to think logically. So we're getting out of that child in motion, and we're stopping and pausing and thinking, oh, I have agency, I have free will, and now I can make a choice. Even if I choose to return back to an old child script, I'm still using my rational mind and my free will. So here you always see Gemini, or the rational thought, by 2. That's why there's so many twin myths. And so here is the Castor Pollux, Romulus Remus, and it's always indicated with the Roman numeral 2, or the sign for Gemini. Versus Sagittarius, which is one-pointed arrow. This is now unified consciousness. You are a dual being. There is spirit and matter. We saw that with the Heros Gamos back in Truth 7. Always, it's coexisting, and these two living together, where the rational mind is used, the intellect is used, the knowledge is used, but it is not enough. In Sagittarius and in Truth 10 of Wisdom and Mentorship, we are really looking for the understanding and the wisdom, the application. So the knowledge is great, but without application, we're just stuck in the rational consciousness. So Descartes called the pineal gland, which we'll talk about in a minute, the seat of the soul. Yet he was always think, therefore I am. He was always referring back to this rational. He understood that they were working together, that the rational informed the spiritual consciousness, or the shamanic state of consciousness. So this is Dionysus. Dionysus is always holding a thyris, and the thyris is at the top. There is a pineal gland, or a pine cone. We see this symbol throughout mythology, and a staff, or a scepter in Egyptian mythology and shamanic traditions. And this is the wisdom stick, or the wisdom staff. And at the top is the pine cone, because it refers back to the pineal gland, considered the seat of consciousness. Pineal gland is responsible for melatonin production, light and dark. So here again, we're seeing the shadow aspect, or the human rational mind, the earthly body, and also here the spiritual mind, the divine spark. So again, in order to be the mystic, the shaman, the wise person, you need to embody both. And Dionysus being a law of gender god, a transgender god, as we see with Shiva, Shakti, and some other gods in mythology, represents the law of gender, which is at the 6th chakra when we're balanced, when the caduceus is balanced. So this is omphalos. It's a stone in Greek. This is the sun glyph in the astrology chart, but it's also the same as the belly button here. One of the things that you're going to see is the 1 point. So the bullseye 1 point, the omphalos point here, the pine cone point, the thyris point, the 1-pointed arrow, the belly button. Life enters through the terra mater, the earth. Without the earth, without the duality, without the humanness, without the earthly body, we cannot function, and our unified consciousness cannot do absolutely anything. So this symbol is also, besides the glyph of the sun, it is considered missed the mark, the original sin. The word sin means miss the mark. I take you back to the myth of Icarus, where his father glued on his wings and he said, don't get too close to the sun, the glue will melt, and don't go too low. And this is exactly the 48 to 52. This is the midpoint. That's why in Truth 7, when I showed you the Heros Gamos, and in Truth 8, when I showed you the spiritual scoreboard, you always see spirit and matter. And then the mandorla, or the unification, is the mystic, or the wise person, or the shaman that walks both worlds. Here we have it again. Here is at the mind level, principle of mentalism. We recognize that we do have an earthly mind. We have also obviously cultural considerations and gender and age informing our rational choices, but we also have a unified consciousness rooted in these laws that should dictate the behavior. Only when you're working in unified consciousness do you not create karma. Only when you say, think, and do. Now, going back to the idea of mentorship and wisdom, sometimes you're going to decide what not to say, even though it's still in unified consciousness. But the point here is, in the astrology chart, you were actually born, for instance, I'm a Pisces, that's my sun sign, but I'm actually born in the opposite sign, in the earth, which is a Virgo. And it's only when I reach unified consciousness that I actually become the highest vibration of Pisces. So I'm born into the lowest vibration of Pisces and Virgo. And then I sort of up the scale, if you will, as I alchemize my mind and my thoughts and my emotions and my desires so that I have a unified consciousness and I become the Pisces sun at the highest vibration, which is the shepherd. So the activity for this week is describe your childhood in one sentence and include one good thing and one bad thing. This truth is about you becoming the guru, the teacher, the master that you need and want in your life. And that is you. This is the point where the teachings end. You will have some teachings in Truth 10, 11, and 12 and some myths, but really this is now the application step. The teachings stop and the doing begins. And so you have to become the lived teaching, the embodiment of the wisdom of the guru, of the teacher. And so Malcolm Gladwell had written a book called Outliers, and he says that you become an expert in something when you have 10,000 hours. Well, you have 10,000 hours in being you, and you are the research question, and your purpose and your soul's will is located in that story. So start with your childhood in one sentence, good, bad, and that starts to unify the consciousness of the light and the dark, of the human and the divine. So you can start finding that thread that then is the teaching, the book, the class, the offering that you offer to society in Truth 9. That's a big part of being a mentor, is knowing exactly what it is that you have to offer and teach, and it's based on your lived and life experience. Thank you and have a great day.